Now, on tax havens, which were the focus of a debate up until a few minutes ago, which I would qualify as a frank debate, an open debate, on tax havens. In the communiqué, you will see a sentence which I quote: "Bank secrecy is now over. The era of bank secrecy is now over." This is a principle, ladies and gentlemen. A principle subscribed to by the 20 countries represented around the table. A list of sanctions. I'm talking about sanctions that would apply to these tax havens or non-cooperative financial centers, which range from making it administratively more difficult for them to the prohibition for states to invest or to put any money in such centers. There's a whole gamut of measures that could be taken by ministers of finance. Furthermore, we have contacted the Secretary General of the OECD during the course of our meeting so that he published the list of tax havens. It will be within the next 2 hours. This publication will come out today. Gordon Brown spoke to the OECD on the subject, and the communiqué takes note of the list of tax havens as published by the OECD. I must tell you, this was a very frank, earnest decision. Everyone around the table wants to put an end once and for all to tax havens. There were no differences of opinion on this. Everyone is keenly aware of the need to sanction such havens, but the only technical difficulty we had is the following one, which is that a certain number of countries around the table are not members of the Global Forum, the OECD's Global Forum. Therefore, one cannot, in all honesty, ask them to uphold rules, whereas they're not yet members of the Forum. So we've given them, they have time in order to join up to the Global Forum, but all of them have agreed that the communiqué make a specific reference to the list of tax havens as defined by the OECD. Might I add that it makes sense that it be the organization that has been tracking these tax havens publish the list of such havens rather than the G20 that hasn't had such experience in tracking tax havens. Now, before I go on to your questions, I'll just go briefly over the rest. There's been an unprecedented increase in the resources of international financial institutions, and in particular the IMF, which is going to be able to loan up to 500 billion. There's going to be 800 billion more for IFIs, some over 700 for the IMF, which is tantamount to trebling its resources rather than doubling them. 250 billion in special drawing rights, 100 billion for the development banks, and we have agreed that the income generated by the sale of IMF gold should go to the lower income countries, and there's going to be a huge increase in aid flows to the poorer income countries, and in particular Africa, which is what I stated when I was in Brazzaville. I'm simply running through the bold headings of the communiqué. Lastly, of course, on the stimulus, we agreed by and large on not only what we have already done, but on the fact that were the crisis to worsen, we would, of course, be prepared to do more. Ladies and gentlemen, it is really, truly a historic event that we should have agreed on all these issues. The Franco-German friendship was a driving force in all of this. Gordon Brown was an incredibly and particularly intellectually honest G20 president. It has been a joy to work with him. And he gave priority to his role as president of the G20 as opposed to perhaps the more traditional leanings of what I would call the Anglo-Saxon community. President Obama really found a way to consensus. He didn't focus exclusively on stimulus. He, as we were, was determined to enhance and step up regulation. In fact, it was even he who managed to manage to persuade President Hu Jintao to agree to the reference to the OECD's publication of a list of tax havens, and I wish to thank him for that. And furthermore, this is something I suggested, and it was accepted, agreed that the third G20 summit would take place after or during the General Assembly of the United Nations in September in New York. Since will all of us be there anyway, we might as well avail ourselves of that opportunity. So the first G20 summit, which laid down the principles thereof, was in Washington. The second G20 as to how to make these principles operational has taken place here. And the last is to gauge the result of what we've decided. And last thing, which isn't on my paper, we've decided to set up a body which is a real world financial organization entrusted with the task of crisis management. We're going to replace the Financial Stability Forum by a Financial Stability Organization, which is very important. It's important because this financial body, in other words, we're going to move from the Financial Stability Forum to the Financial Stability Committee, or Council rather, which is going to, in its membership, encompass, as of the outset, all emerging economies. Very important, this one as well, because China and others are going to be able to play their role. Now, I'm sorry this presentation is perhaps not very clear, but I've just literally come out of a lengthy meeting. The role of supervisors has been substantially increased, because we are going to set up the supervisory bodies or boards that are lacking for the supervision of international banks and world banks. So henceforth there will be supervisory bodies or supervisors, or rather national supervisors will form committees in order to supervise international banks. Well, look, frankly, to tell you the truth, all of this goes beyond what we could have imagined. All of us are aware of the fact that we cannot go it alone. Alone we can achieve nothing. We are all of us aware of the fact that we need new rules. We need to reform the system. That is precisely what we've done. And I am truly delighted with the result. I think all of us are delighted with this result. And there was something somewhat moving in seeing countries as different as China, India, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, Germany, France, of course, the United States of America, agreeing on measures as precise as these ones in order to cope with the crisis. And our idea, to conclude, is that if we want to put the economic crisis behind us, we need to rebuild confidence. In order to rebuild confidence, we need new rules in order to put an end to the financial crisis.